Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters. Welcome to my weekly live chat. I'm super excited to be here with you today talking about one of my favorite things, quilting. And I have a great live chat for you today because I'm going to tell you all about a brand new upcoming free machine quilting series. So super excited for that. If you're watching live, I have a giveaway for you. So if you're watching, leave a comment and Jessica will pick a winner, and one lucky winner is going to win a fat quarter bundle of my brand new fabric collection, which I'll talk about here in a second. And I mean, who doesn't want a beautiful fat quarter bundle? Not only is it beautiful, you can use it for decor, make quilts with it. Anyway, so as always, Jessica's behind the camera monitoring the chats. So if you have any questions, put them in the comments and she'll give those to me at the end and I'll try to get to them. So normally on my live chats, I talk about a quilting technique or some kind of teachable moment, but today we're going to go kind of dive into an upcoming video series. So I'm super excited to tell you all about that. And so without further ado, let's get right to it. So the Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along is a video series I do about twice a year. So think of it like an online class. And this one coming up is going to be free motion feathers, borders, blocks, and backgrounds. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but I wanted to make sure you knew exactly what we were going to be working with through the video series. Every challenge follows a technique or a particular design. Like we've done rulers, we've done fillers, and this time we're going to do feathers. And the reason is I have such a love for feathers, and I'm pretty sure it's because it took me so long to figure out how to quilt them. When I first started long arm quilting, I mean, that's been like 23 years ago, there was no YouTube, so I was like on the Yahoo forums trying to figure out how people quilted these feathers, and I thought for sure I would never ever get it. Now, I did eventually get it, and I love them. I mean, I could put a feather on everything. And so teaching other people to love it as much as I do is so much fun. So if you have been trying to learn feathers and not being successful, this is for you. If you know how to quilt feathers and you're looking for some design inspiration and techniques to put on your quilt, this is also for you. So I am super excited to be teaching it. So first of all, we're going to be talking about using feathers, obviously, in borders, blocks, and backgrounds. And we're going to talk about how to adapt feathers into those areas. So not just designs, I mean, we will learn some, but also techniques, these ideas that you can take and apply in different ways to your blocks. I love to make my videos applicable to as many people as possible, so I try to have variations and other things in there. Now, if this sounds familiar, if you've participated in previous Free Motion Challenge quilting alongs, you might be like, wait, I thought we already did a feathers one. And we did a couple years ago. We did fabulous feathers. And so when I designed the panel, which I'll talk about this in a second, I wanted it to be kind of a variation of that first feathers one. Now, this is a completely separate video series. We're going to be talking about different designs and different applications. So if you took that first feathers challenge, this would be perfect. If you haven't, you can still do it. They're not linked, but they're different content. I feel like I could teach only feather classes and we could do this twice a year for years and years. There's just so many different things you can do with them. Now, let's talk about the details, kind of like the nitty-gritty of it. This challenge doesn't start until July. Now, I'm putting it out there now because I know summertime is busy. May is just crazy for a lot of people, but this video series will start in July. It gives you plenty of time to gather your supplies, get yourself psyched up for it, and runs through 5 videos. So we're going to be talking through, you can kind of see the schedule here, the different designs and breaking them down. So first of all, the first video will be feather basics. Think of this kind of like a refresher if you already feel comfortable quilting feathers, or the basics of it if you haven't done it before. So before we can learn how to take these feathers and put them in different areas of our quilts, we need to learn how to quilt it. So like I said, this might be a refresher for some of you, but it's going to be a great way to learn how the design goes together. We'll practice on our regular fabric, and then we'll jump into the actual blocks and designs on the panel as well. So video 2 will be feather designs for borders and sashings. Here I'm talking about how do we use feathers in areas that are too small for your normal feather. Normally when I look at a quilt and I'm trying to decide what I'm going to quilt in an area, the first question I ask myself is, will a feather fit in here? And sometimes it won't. Well, how do we take parts of that feather design and still use them in those narrower sashings and borders? So we're going to talk through 4 different sashing designs and also kind of how to use just half a feather. So we'll see a good little variation there. That was one of the questions in the type chat before I went live. How many individual designs are there? So when we're talking about the sashings, we're going to see how do we, change direction with them? How can we leave out some parts of it to make it fit? How can we, create these designs? And so it's a lot of fun to look at that and think these are all the same kind of basic shape, just used in slightly different ways. So here you can see a couple examples of the different designs. This is a great way to practice a feather design if you're not quite comfortable with using it in a bigger area. You're like, I just want to kind of keep it a little more contained. I don't want to fill in this area, but it's a lot of fun. And it's going to give your quilting that feathery, curvy look, even if you can't fit a whole feather in that area. So you can kind of see some examples here. And you can see more. So the panel, which I'll talk about in a second, gives us plenty of opportunities to use those sashings and border designs. By the time you get to the bigger sashings, like 4 inches or so, like you can usually fit a feather in there. So these designs are going to be more kind of geared towards like that 1 to 3 inch size. But of course you can adapt them, and we'll talk about that as well. And then in the video series, I'll also talk about how do we turn corners with the designs. One of the things about machine quilting is you can learn the design, but you also have to learn how to apply it to your quilt. Like, how do you quilt a feather, but how do you turn the corner with it? How do you take sections out? So I'm excited to kind of get into these concepts that we really haven't talked about in the previous Feathers Challenge. So just some more pretty pictures of the quilting and the designs we're going to learn and turning the corners with that. Then video 3, we're going to go into block designs. Now, in the previous Feathers video series, we touched on blocks for a second, but we just mostly talked about how to fill in the blocks with the designs, not really breaking them down a little bit more. So here, I'm kind of looking beyond those bigger blocks to different ways to use feathers in those areas. So we'll talk about designs for smaller blocks, like this kind of feathered swirl that we see right here. One of my favorite designs for those squares or circles that are about 4 inches or so. We'll also talk about how do you break out and fill in those irregular shapes with that feathery kind of shape, creating whether it's a twisting effect or some different detail, mini feathers, and kind of having fun with it. When I was coming up with the designs for the video series, I really had to kind of hold myself back a little bit because there's so many things you can do that we could make this a 20-part video series. But I kind of settled on a couple different techniques that would be perfect. And here you can kind of see some examples there. So we'll talk about how to fill in those smaller sections of pieced blocks with that feather design. But we can also use feathers in those larger blocks. And so how do we fill in those bigger blocks with the feather design that might be too big, whether that's quilting a motif like this, or kind of using the quilting to create those secondary patterns like you can see right here. So a lot of different techniques. Like I said, we'll learn certain designs, but you'll be able to take these techniques and apply them in different ways and create your own variations. Then we're also going to kind of touch on designs, how to use feathers around your blocks. So technically backgrounds, yes, but in the instance here, it's like a smaller area, not the bigger background areas. How do we use the feathers in there, whether it's creating kind of a meander that works its way around those blocks, or a kind of wrapping effect with the quilting. So making the feather kind of circle that block and kind of showing it off. Because what we put around blocks is really just as important as what's in the blocks themselves. So how do we use those feathers to draw attention to that? Then in videos 4 and 5, we're going to talk about feather backgrounds. I'll do 2 designs per video, and we'll talk about how do you use the design in the backgrounds, and also how do you apply it to borders. So when we talk about borders, I'm talking about those bigger sections that are perfect for feathers because it gives it this kind of framed effect. But how do we take a design and apply it to that area? So we'll see things like this feather meander. How do we put it in the background, but also how do we put it in those bigger borders, maneuvering our way around. We'll talk about like divided feathers, where you kind of just divide up that area and quilt feathers that are just all smashed in on themselves. I love this technique because you get plenty of practice quilting those feathers, but also how to do that kind of more intricate looking feather meander. I won't say difficult, it just has a little bit more detail to it. Then also the paisley feather. I love the paisley feather. We've seen this one in a previous challenge, but it's been a while. It's time to revisit it. Paisley feather, which you can kind of see with those paisleys around that swirl, is just so much fun to quilt and so fast. So that's all we're going to be learning through the 5 weeks. I am super excited to kind of go into these details and really kind of help address the feathers in those areas, and it's so much fun. Now, like I said, it starts in July, but you might be wondering, how do I participate in this Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along video series? Now, I know I have a lot of you that have already quilted along with me in previous videos, so you already know how this works, but it's actually very easy. There's not a whole lot you have to do. First, you're going to gather your supplies. you don't need a whole lot to quilt along with me. I don't require a lot of supplies or, required kits or anything like that, because I want to make the barrier to joining me as low as possible. I want you to have no reason that you can't quilt along with me. So you'll need a sewing machine, you'll need a free motion quilting foot or your long arm, you'll need something to quilt on, and some thread as well. So on the landing page, if you click the link in the description box below, it'll take you to that, and you can get a downloadable supply list sheet, and it will tell you everything that you need. Now, one of the things that I do for the challenge, I design a quilt panel just for the video series. Been doing this for several years, and I love it because it allows me to quilt along with you on the same project. That gives you the experience of like quilting on a quilt without having to piece it or make it. So as I'm designing these panels, I'm kind of thinking through, what do I want to teach? How can I make the panel look cool so that you want to hang it up when you're done? And what areas am I going to need? So this is kind of the result of that. Obviously, I needed some blocks and some borders and some backgrounds to fill in. So another thing about the panel, though, is I designed it so it had a couple little, I won't say cheat codes, but a couple little designs that you can quilt right on top of. So 2 of the blocks have a feather meander printed in there, a feathered swirl printed on it, so you can quilt right over the top of it to get the hang of how that design goes together. And then also has that kind of pieced looking block in the center, that you don't have to actually piece. So it's going to be the perfect palette or the perfect canvas for our quilting. Now, the panels are available in 2 sizes. This has kind of evolved over the years because people are like, I want to do a bigger one, and others are like, I want to do a smaller one. So you can choose your quilting adventure. We have the smaller one that's 42 by 54, and then a slightly bigger one that's 58 by 69. So just depending on what you want to do with it, you have those 2 options. Again, if you're watching and you're like, I want to remember everything she's saying, don't worry, you can click the link in the description box below. It'll take you to our website that has all the details, so you can rest assured that you'll know exactly what's going on. Now, for a limited time, we do offer a 50% off the small panel if you buy the larger one. So if you can't choose, you don't have to. You can do them both. You can use the promo code FEATHER when checking out. And again, you can get both of those if you want. Now, that's just for a limited time, so if you're kind of on the fence, I would definitely do that before that goes away. And this is something silly I started a few challenges ago. I love making little pins. So it's like just a 2.5-inch pin that is, corresponds with this challenge. So if you're a collector like me, you can collect the pins from the challenge. So you'll get a free pin with panel purchase while supplies last. So just keep that in mind if you want that pin, but it's kind of fun just to look at it and see, all the things you've done. Now, there's some other products that go with that. So besides the panel, I have some coordinating threads. If you've watched my live chats, you guys know I love picking out thread colors. And so choosing threads for the panel is definitely one of my favorite things to do. Now, I will say one thing I try to do is, since I know we do these video series fairly regularly, I try to not have too much overlap with previous threads. Sometimes it has to happen because it's just the perfect color, but I try to throw in some colors that we might not have used before so you can kind of start building up your thread collection. So you can kind of see I have that, that purpley blue color, that kind of tealish green color, that I love that strawberry blonde, that lighter color, and the other ones. Now this kind of gives you an example of where we're going to be placing those thread colors if you want suggestions. So as I was quilting, I'm thinking, what threads am I using where, and filling it in. And this is actually in that downloadable suggested supplies list, so you'll have this graphic as well. One thing I want to point out is normally in the video series, I include the background thread color as well. So light gray or something like that. This time I didn't do that. I'm sure you have enough light neutrals laying around. So I've these 5 colors go with the different, colors on here, and then you can use a neutral in the background. But if you didn't want to, that strawberry blonde color looks gorgeous in the background, and that's actually what I used on my panel. So you can use that as the background color or use your own, totally up to you. We also have the backing fabric. So I went with a charcoal gray just because I wanted to kind of tone down some of the rainbow look, and then the optional border panel, which you can see around here. The border panel also came about because people wanted borders on their panel, and so you can add that on as well. This might look familiar because I've used this on a previous challenge a few years ago, that kind of paisley design, that paisley feather, but I just thought it was so perfect. I was like, oh, I gotta rework that and use it for here, so you can kind of see what that looks like. Again, when you get to the website, it has all the information there for you. Another thing I've done is designed a fabric collection to go with the panel. Now this is just for fun. This is the Frolic fabric collection, and these little individual pieces are the designs that are in the cornerstones on the panel. So they're just kind of speckled in there, but it's kind of cute and pretty there. So if you want to customize your panel, if you want to add some different background fabric or add some more borders or do whatever you want, these are the coordinating prints that go with it. Now, designing fabrics is a lot of fun, especially when I'm kind of playing around with different colors and textures and designs. And this quilt panel, I wanted to be really bright and fun with the ombre fabrics and with, you know, those kind of rainbow colors. Just, we're heading into summer, let's make it just bright and fun. So that was kind of my idea there. You can see some of the prints here, you know, from the reds to the watermelons to the greens, just kind of filling in those areas, you know, around our border panel. Now, one of my favorite things about, or one of my favorite prints in the collection is this one. Now, I shouldn't have favorites, right? I should love all my fabrics the same, but let's be honest, sometimes I love them a little bit more. This one is like a river rock kind of effect, but it's also ombre on the repeat. So when you look at that little picture, it's hard to see the whole effect. And over on the right, you can see like that ombre effect, just if that's something you're interested in. I was super tickled with that. And that's available in a couple of colors. And again, just some different textures and designs. Maybe you want to customize, maybe you don't, it's totally fine, but it just goes along with it. All right, once you've gathered your supplies, and by the way, we have all those panels ready to order now, so if you want to go ahead and place your order and get that going, that's perfect. Once you've got your supplies, you can register to receive emails. Now, once the videos go live, they'll be on my YouTube channel, they'll be on my website, but if you want, we can email that to you directly. So we'll email you, hey, the video's here, here's the links to the things you need. And so it's just a great way to be sure you're getting those personalized emails directly about the challenge. All right, then you're gonna quilt and connect. So this is where it gets fun, you guys. The video is gonna come out July 14th. You're gonna watch the video tutorial. You're gonna say, oh my gosh, she is so funny. Well, I'm thinking that you might say that. And then you're gonna try quilting the design that we learned. Whether you're using the panel or not, you'll practice the technique, have fun with it, and then you can ask any questions during the live chat. You know, that's exactly kind of how these live chats started, was with the challenge video series. I was like, well, you know, you watch the video, you might have questions. And then you can also join our Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along Facebook group. It's a fun group, it's big, it's a lot of pictures, a lot of inspiration, and show off your quilting. What I love about quilters is we are so encouraging. I love show and tell, or when people show off their quilting, because it's so much fun to see people working through it. So definitely an option for you there. Again, the videos will come out July 14th, and you can join at that point. Now, like I said, quiltingismytherapy.com, or the link in the description box has everything you need, so you can be sure to check that out. But like I've said in previous video series, my videos will stay on YouTube indefinitely. So if you're not ready to start in July, no problem. You can just kind of quilt along whenever you're ready. And for the same reason that the first Feathers challenge that we did a few years ago, you can still try that in the meantime. So a lot of different options there. Again, I know that's a lot of information, but I was so excited to finally get to show you all the details. Putting on the video series is my biggest project of the year. It's one of my favorite things to do, but it's a lot of work behind the scenes. And then I come out and show all my stuff, and I'm just hoping everybody likes it. So it's a fun way to finally get to show all the behind the scenes stuff. Now, there were some questions in the type chat before I went live, so I'll answer those. And then if Jessica has any for me, looks like she has a few. Okay, Cheryl says, I use spray basting and pins, but I still get bunching on the backing of my fabric. So ruching, so I like to call it, or tucks. That is so frustrating. The first thing I'll say is I don't worry too much about it, because once you wash the quilt, you're not going to see it, but I know not everybody feels that way. A couple things. The better it's stabilized, the smoother it's going to stay. That's definitely just a fact. I like to place or have it stabilized within a hand size. I don't want a whole bunch of big spaces underneath. Sometimes, though, that kind of tuck on the back can come from something else, though. If your free motion foot is too low, it can force that fabric in, and it's not quite enough room, so it kind of wrinkles on the bottom. So you might see, if your free motion foot has an adjustable height to it, you might adjust it up just a little bit. If you raise it a little too high, you'll get skip stitches. So if you see skip stitches, you know you've gone too far. And another thing I'll say, and this is, hopefully I can explain this, I probably should just do a whole video on this, but when you're quilting on your sewing machine, you're moving the quilt like this, right? Your hands are staying in the same position. What I don't want you to do is twist the quilt while you're quilting. That's creating that kind of twisting effect on the backing fabric and can result in those bunches. I'm not saying that you can't rotate your quilt, you definitely can, but I'm just not gonna do it while I'm quilting. I'll stop, raise my foot, reposition it, smooth it out, and then begin again. Some things you can also do to help mitigate that is a lot of quilters like to start in the center and work their way out, and it just kind of pushes everything out. That's definitely an option. And then just maybe kind of stabilizing areas as you go. So if I'm going to do some dense quilting in this particular area, I might stitch around that first and then fill it in just to kind of help hold it there. Again, I know it's super frustrating, but I would try not to let that keep you from quilting because, I mean, it's just on the back, it's going to be fine. So hopefully that helped. And if anybody is watching, leave a comment in there and let Cheryl know or me know if there's any other tips that you find super helpful with that. All right, Terry asked a great question. Terry says, when she's free motion quilting straight lines on her sewing machine and she stops to reposition her hands, sometimes she'll get a zigzag or where the quilting kind of jumps over. How do we avoid that? Okay, I'm glad that's such a good question. When you're advancing a straight line, there's always going to be a little bit of a bobble because you're easing, slowing into a stop and then gearing out of it. So there's always a little bit of, a transition there. One thing I do with that is I try to alter where those transitions are so they're not all lined up. Our eyes will kind of look for a pattern. If we see them all lined up, we'll notice that. But if they're kind of random, we might not. But that zigzag is coming, I think, from when you pause and you reposition your hands. If there's any weight on that quilt, it pulls against the needle ever so slightly. Then when the needle comes up, it shifts before the needle goes down. So it looks like the quilting has kind of jumped. So when you stop and before you start again, make sure that there's no wrinkling around that needle. You don't want to see, a shadow from where it's kind of pulling on that needle because as soon as that needle comes up, it's going to shift on you. So just kind of take a second and make sure that that's okay. Hopefully that helps. That's one of the joys, right, of transitioning on there. And then Katie had a fun question. She asked, what's my favorite filler design? My favorite filler design to use around something else. So filler is a same design, but just quilted smaller to fill in background areas or help highlight something else. And if I had to pick one, I'm stranded on a desert island, I can only have one filler, it would be swirls. I love swirls because they're fast and fun to quilt. You still get that static kind of squishing down of that background area without taking the time to do something like pebbles. So that's just mine. But I will say sometimes I go through phases where I'm like, ooh, I'm in a swirl quilting phase, or maybe I like to do back and forth lines. It just depends on how I'm feeling. But swirls would definitely be my option there. All right, and Katie, I don't know if the same one or a different one, said she's quilting on her long arm. Her thread breaks when she's quilting right to left. How can she stop that? This is a good question. So the way the long arms work, the mechanism of the bobbin is such that the machine works better from left to right when quilting straight lines. I'm not talking about quilting right to left in all different directions. But if you go to quilt one straight line right to left, sometimes you can see shredding. And that just has to do with the way the long arms work. But I'm talking, you should be able to go a big chunk before it does that. If you're only going a few inches and it's breaking, there's a different issue. Now, if I am only going a few inches and it's shredding or it's breaking, it could be that my needle is turned just so slightly away from that thread. And what happens is if it's turned away from the thread, there's a little bit more friction on that eye, especially when you're going in one direction, because that thread is constantly rubbing right there, as opposed to like a swirl where I'm going in all different directions. Now, I would love to hear everybody's comments on this, so definitely let me know what you think. But some quilters swear by ballpoint needles. They say ballpoint needles are the way to go. That takes care of that problem. I don't have any issues. I've not had luck with that, but you might. Somebody else in the type chat suggested, if they're using glide thread on top, maybe using an omni thread or a thread that is a wrapped poly or a cotton, because it's a little grabbier. It kind of helps hold onto that thread a little bit more. Now, I use glide in the top and the bottom, and I don't have any issues with it, but I'm also not doing really long straight lines right to left. So if I wanted to do that, I would break it up every once in a while with a couple swirls and then continue on. Then I would act like it was part of the design choice, or like I'd give it some artistic reason, but that would be why I would do it. Hope that helps. I know that's not fun, especially when you have thread issues, but it happens sometimes. All right, how about some questions? When I use a different thread color in the bobbin, I'm seeing a lot of that color when I stop and start in corners, curves, etc. I'm using my domestic and I have changed tension. So what you're probably seeing is where that thread is pulling up to the top, and this could happen for a couple things. Like you said, it could be a tension thing, but if it were a tension thing, you would see it all the time. The fact that it's happening in those corners or those points means you're probably taking more stitches in those areas, and it's kind of building up just a bit. So check to see if you're kind of hesitating in there too long. And it's hard to say like on here, but am I hesitating so it's taking several stitches at that point? Because that's going to just pull it up a little bit more. And then sometimes if you are seeing those pokies, what I like to call them, it could maybe mean the tension is off just slightly and it just shows more when you're in those corners or points. So double check your tension, make sure it still looks good on the straightaways. This isn't the question you asked, but one thing that helps with that is using a thread color that's similar in the bobbin and the top, right? So that way, if I do get those pokies, you can't see them anyway. So that's kind of why I like to match those threads, just to help hide that. So if I was using black thread on top and white thread on bottom, I might see some of that pull through. So hopefully that helps. How do I avoid thread buildup when doing feathers? So this is definitely going to be something that we'll talk about in the video series. One way I do that is I like to use an echoed spine. So some feathers have one line as a spine and the petals coming out, but that's a lot of buildup in the center. So I like to have an echoed line in my spine that just helps separate those two sides. It's a subjective choice. There's no right or wrong there, so don't stress out about it. But another thing I'll do is if I find that I have a lot of buildup, especially at that spine, I might just stop short of it and then change direction. So there's actually a little gap in between my petal and my spine, so I don't get that thread buildup. But ultimately though, when you're done and you step back, you're not gonna see it as much. So when you're quilting, you're like, oh my gosh, I can see my back tracking, it's so obvious. But after you put filler around it, and after you step back and look at the whole picture, it's gonna look fine. So hopefully that helps. This is a great question. I didn't say this. Will I show it on a long arm or a domestic? I should have mentioned this. I'm gonna demonstrate on both. So in my previous challenges, I always show how to do a little bit on the sewing machine and a little bit on the long arm. So we'll see both of them there. And if a design has a different tip or a different application per machine, I include that as well. So it's like, oh, if you're on a sewing machine, you can do this. Or if you're on a long arm, you can do that. Another thing that I didn't mention is, as always with all my challenges, I have free downloadable quilting diagrams. So as you're quilting along, you'll have this free resource to help you out. Do we need the stencil? That's a great question. I did not put that in the pictures. I think I missed that. Yes, I designed, thank you. I designed a feather meander stencil that will help you with that feather meander. Now, do you need it? If you already know how to do the feather meander, you're already comfortable? No. It's just a tool to help you learn how the design goes together. But if you are like, oh, I wish I could quilt that and I just can't do it, it's definitely going to be handy. And we were able to kind of get it to that perfect size. So it's like $8.95. It's super cheap. So that's also in the link below. How much quilting do I get to do with being so busy? Great question. Great question. So not as much as I used to. When I quilted for customers, really hardcore, like that was my main job. I mean, I was quilting 40 hours a week. You know, it was a full-time job. Now, not as much. But I did just piece and quilt a little quilt all for myself. I'll have to show you guys a picture next week because it's so cute. It's like a foundation paper pieced mountain. But I was like, this is so much fun. I love quilting for the challenges and I love quilting for videos, but it was just fun to do something just for myself. So I would say not as much as I used to. It's all a cycle here. Like sometimes if we're right in the videos and I'm filming and editing, I'm doing no quilting. If we're kind of right here where I'm in between, I might be doing a little filming, but I can do more quilting. So it just depends, but not near as much as I used to. So great question. Love that. Well, guys, I appreciate you hanging out and listening to all the details. I am so excited to quilt along with you. The Free Motion Challenge quilting alongs kind of started, I don't know, it wasn't meant to be like this big deal, but it's so much fun getting to see you guys quilt, getting to quilt along with you and grow together in our journey. I enjoy it so much. So I hope you'll quilt along with me. Again, be sure to check out all this information in the description box below just by clicking the link in that description box because we're going to have so much fun. Now, even though that series doesn't start till July, I'll still be doing my live chats. So I'll be back next week on Thursday at 3 p.m. Central with another live chat. Topic to be determined, so I can't wait until then. Now, the winner of this beautiful fat quarter collection, oh, so cute. It's never me, by the way. Jessica never picks my name. I need to talk to her about that, is Deb English. So Deb, email us at customerservice@quiltingismytherapy.com and you'll get your beautiful fat quarter bundle. If you didn't win, if you're not Deb English, well, you can click the link in the description box and get that for yourself. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Until the next live chat, happy quilting.